So I recently got together with a guy from my hobby. He asked me out first and I had some doubts that we'd work together as a couple because of the age difference. He's 35 and I'm 22. So, in my apartment, since it's an old house that was originally a single-family house, there isn't much soundproofing. And the floors creak when people move. I've gotten used to the sound of the guy upstairs getting up at 4 a.m. since he starts work at 5. And the sound of the girls in the apartments to either side of mine watching telenovelas till midnight, taking work calls all day and having friends over on weekend nights. I know when I play music or have friends over, some of the sound leaks through the walls. So I'd never get upset about hearing my neighbors because it goes both ways. So, when my boyfriend started coming over more often, he had complaints about the neighbors, which put me in an awkward place. He wanted to go speak to them or have me text them and I said no. For example, one of the early times he stayed over we went to bed around 10. He wanted me to ask my neighbor to turn down her TV. I said she didn't have it that loud and she turns it off at midnight anyway. At 4 a.m., he got very irritated with my upstairs neighbor getting up and cooking breakfast. I said that he would be done by 5 because that's when his shift starts. At 7 a.m., he was still trying to sleep in and the neighbor on the other side had some work calls that he said he couldn't sleep through. I offered him earplugs and he said he couldn't sleep with them in either. He wanted me to ask her to quiet down. He had similar comments every time he heard someone else in the building just living their life, especially if it was when he was in bed. I got frustrated with my boyfriend and told him, you can't expect to date a hot young 22-year-old and not want to deal with a 22-year-old's living situation. I don't know if you realize, but this is a normal apartment for someone my age. Hell, my neighbors are pretty great. Nobody's throwing loud parties on work nights. Nobody's having screaming fights. Nobody's having babies. The hot young part was in sarcastic air quotes because those were his words, not mine. He got irritated and asked why I was bringing age into it. And I said it's because he can't both want someone so young and also want someone with house kinda money. And he was being so out of touch with how normal people in their 20s live. He got really irritated with me bringing age into it. And even more annoyed when I'd respond to his neighbor complaints in the future with, okay, boomer. Or tell him that if he wanted me to have a rich person apartment, he could pay for it. It's not possible for me to get to his house on my own because I don't have a car and the buses don't go that far into the suburbs. So that would mean him driving 30 minutes from his house in the suburbs to pick me up, then an extra 30 to drive me to his house. Then an hour round trip early in the morning to get me home in time for work. It's a lot easier for him to visit me in the city. I am using boomer as a joke or a figure of speech to say acting out of touch and entitled to tell other people what to do. It is a common figure of speech to say, okay, boomer, to someone who is acting entitled regardless of their actual age. It's more of a mindset thing. I googled his property records for his house and he owns it with a woman who shares his last name. Holy shit. I don't know if she's his wife or ex-wife or what, but I'm out of here. I'm honestly freaking out right now, but I just gotta say, great big thank you to everyone who noticed red flags and made me question that. I've blocked his number. He can have fun figuring out where I went. My husband Nick was married to his first wife Vanessa for 5 years and they had 2 amazing kids, Luke and Lila. Sadly, Vanessa died in an accident 11 years ago when the kids were very young. I started dating Nick 8 years ago and we started off very slowly for obvious reasons. Nick has always been a little more distant than anyone I'd ever been with. But he and the kids lost Vanessa so young that I understood it. After 3 years of dating, Nick asked me to marry him and I moved in. I've always had a really great relationship with Luke and Lila and they were happy for me to marry their dad. I had wanted an actual wedding, nothing big. But Nick really didn't want one, so we got married at the courthouse with just Luke and Lila present. We had a really fast engagement, but it worked for all of us. I have loved being Luke and Lila's stepmom and officially adopted them after I found out I was pregnant with our son, Casey. The kids have been so great with Casey and help out so much. Nick was wonderful during the pregnancy and had always been a really loving dad and husband. But Nick has been pulling away a lot the last few months. He's been even more distant than usual and working late nights and going away with friends almost every weekend. I've tried talking to him, but he's been impatient with both me and the kids. I found out I was pregnant in June and am now 21 weeks pregnant with a girl. The kids are excited to have a little sister, but Nick just seems so indifferent to everything and everyone. He's been missing soccer games, Lila's birthday, doctor's appointments, etc. Casey is too young to notice, but Luke and Lila are so hurt by their dad's absence. These kids are so good and they lost their mom so young, and I'm infuriated that Nick is ignoring the kids like this. Last week, I finally sat Nick down and told him that he needs to stop disappearing and be more present in our lives. We're going to have another child soon, and before we know it Luke and Lila will be grown up and going to college. After an hour of arguing, he screamed at me that he wished Vanessa was still alive and that I had switched places with her and died instead. He also threw in some awful comments that I need to stop pretending I'm Luke and Lila's real mom and that I'm only half the mom Vanessa was. The final straw was him saying that he never even wanted any kids with me, but did it so I'd keep busy and leave him alone. I'm so beyond hurt right now. I know I'm just his second choice, but I've always tried to honor Vanessa and tell Luke and Lila how lucky they were to have her as their mom. I love all of our kids more than anything, and I'm just so heartbroken. Nick barely pays attention to Casey now and doesn't even acknowledge the pregnancy. He somewhat apologized this weekend and took all 3 kids to lunch, but he won't even look me in the eye. He seems like he wants to talk, but he doesn't say anything, and I'm too upset to even be near him. I'm not sure where to go from here. Honestly, I can't even be around Nick right now, and if there weren't any kids involved, I'd leave and never look back. I'm not sure if he's cheating or the thought of a 4th child is stressing him out. But I'm devastated and not sure how or why I should save this marriage, besides doing it for the kids. My husband, 35 years old, does not have a car. He sold his old one to help pay for his brother's wedding. I did not agree on this, but he had this car before we got together, so it's a shared property. Besides that, I have my own car, so that did not affect me till my husband started complaining about having to commute to work and hangout places. He tried to get me to let him drive my car several times, but I stood firm and put a boundary, making him understand that my car will never be driven by him. One of the reasons why is because of how bad his driving is. His brother lives out of town. My husband asked if he could drive my car to the wedding, but I refused, but not because I'm not invited. Another story for another day, because like I said, my car is off limits. He threw a fit, calling me unreasonable to let him take public transportation because he can barely stand it for 10 minutes, let alone hours. I said it wasn't my problem, which irritated him but made him stop arguing about it. The day that he was supposed to travel out of town, I woke at 10 a.m. and couldn't find my car key. I went outside and couldn't find my car either. I was beyond pissed. I called him, and like I expected, he took it and was on his way to the other town. I lost it and told him I gave him no permission to take it for a whole 5 days, and said that if he won't turn around with it and come home, then I'd call the cops and report it missing. His response was, "You wouldn't dare do it 'cause you know what would happen." I hung up on him, then immediately called the police and told them about my situation. I did not tell them my husband took it because they'd think it's a family dispute and decide to not get involved. I just reported it missing. 2 hours later, I got a call from my husband saying he was back in town and was being held at our local police station. I went to the station and talked to the cops. My husband made a scene there, swearing over and over that I gave him permission to take it, and said I was acting out of jealousy and spite because he was going to attend a wedding that I was not invited to. I took my car and went home, but he had to stay a little longer. He came home in the evening and went on a rage fit about how I created an awful situation and almost caused him to miss his brother's wedding. He called me vindictive, bitter, and a lunatic to call the police on him and try to accuse him of stealing my car. He had to leave the same day to be able to be there with his family and decided to extend his stay, and he still hasn't gotten back yet. Right now his mom and brother are blasting me for what happened and calling me spiteful. My children are 17 and 14 respectively, and I'm hoping the fact that they're teenagers is the reason for their incredibly shitty behavior. My husband, before he met me, had a wife and a newborn baby that passed away in Canada due to hazardous road conditions that resulted in a 4-car smash-up. No one was at fault, it was a horrific disaster. And my husband was devastated as a result and fell into alcoholism to cope. I had my own trauma from the past, and similarly turned to alcoholism to cope. It was at an AA meeting where we met, 20 years ago almost to the day now. And we slowly started to heal together here in the US. I have always been incredibly respectful of my husband's last wife and child. I like to joke that I'm keeping her seat warm until my husband enters heaven. I've had too much loss and hurt in my life to feel jealousy like this. And I am so damaged that I just feel lucky that I got to actually feel love in this world, and that my husband could open his beautiful heart to me. We had 2 children, 2 sons. We'd never told them about my husband's wife or baby, because it's a part of my husband's life that he keeps under lock and key. He has never healed from his grief, and therapy etc. has helped him only to a degree. My mother-in-law told the kids this Sunday gone, as she decided it was time for them to know. She didn't consult us before telling them, and certainly didn't do it in our presence. Since then my sons have been making the most disgusting dead baby jokes. They've been prodding their dad asking why we'd never told them. And instead of approaching the topic with respect, they're acting like we've kept a secret affair family from them or something. My 14Y//O went on to say to me in private, thank goodness, not in front of his father, that he was glad my husband's previous family was dead. I broke and yelled at him, and told him it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever heard him say. I asked where his anger was coming from, and he burst forth that we were shitty parents for keeping secrets. He told me that it made so much sense why we were abnormal, why we don't drink, why we are so boring and quiet, why my husband is panicky around roads, etc. The 2 are pretty heartbroken, and I feel like we have just destroyed a part of our children's lives as a result of us staying quiet. I am hurting, my husband is grieving all over again, and I don't know how to proceed. I have and will always reiterate to our kids that they are loved, but this behavior seems so overreactive for the news.